Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, give a like, and don't forget to leave a comment. Enjoy watching.
"You're stirring up trouble, Dan," Carl said, not even looking up from his overpriced espresso machine perched like a throne in the corner of his glass-walled office. He had one of those fake polished smiles, the kind you learn at corporate retreats where they teach you how to screw someone without making eye contact. I was standing in front of his desk with a folder in my hand, 4 months' worth of timesheets, with every extra hour logged, every weekend sacrificed, every time one of my team stayed late so we could keep Carl's golden boy status at the Monday exec meetings. I nodded. Just once. Calm. Controlled. And then I handed him the folder like it was a peace offering, even though it was really a goddamn grenade. "Just thought you'd want to take a look," I said, stepping back and crossing my arms. Might be some discrepancies. Carl didn't take the folder. He just stared at it like it might stain his mahogany desk, like the paper itself was contagious. Then he waved it off with a little flick of his fingers, dismissive, arrogant, the same way he talked about anyone over 40 in meetings. "You've been here a long time, Dan," he said, finally leaning back in his chair. "We value that. But you need to adapt. We don't track overtime the way we used to. It's all blended productivity now, deliverables, not hours." I could feel the blood behind my eyes starting to boil. "Right," I said, still holding my voice steady. "But payroll doesn't pay in deliverables. My team's rent is still due in dollars." He smiled, then sighed, like I was a kid who didn't get the joke. "We're not a clock-punching company anymore." That's when I knew. It wasn't that they forgot to pay us. It was that they never intended to. They changed the rules mid-game and hoped no one old enough to remember how things used to work would notice. Problem was, I did notice. I always notice. It's why they leaned on me for 18 damn years to put out fires they started. I didn't push it then. I just nodded again, slow and deliberate, tucked the folder under my arm, and left his office. And when I walked past his assistant, this bright-eyed 20-something with a fake laugh giggle and an iPad she called a task hub, I gave her the same calm smile. The email came 2 hours later. From HR, of course. Not even from Carl. "Effective immediately, your position is being reclassified as Project Transition Advisor. You will report directly to Operations Support. All team assignments are to be reassigned. Please schedule an exit debrief with People Strategy." No meeting. No warning. Just an auto-sign slap to the face. Project Transition Advisor? That's not a job title. That's a padded cell in a corporate basement. No team. No responsibilities. Just a placeholder with a fake name, designed to make you quit before they have to pay severance. I stared at the email, read it twice, then once more for good measure. I'd built this department. Not helped build it, built it. I trained Carl when he first came in, back when he still asked me questions instead of ignoring my existence. I'd taken over after 2 layoffs and 3 reorganizations, kept the team afloat during the pandemic, negotiated vendor contracts that saved us 6 figures. And now, just like that, I was being quietly pushed out the back door. I didn't respond to the email. I just shut my laptop, stood up, and went for a walk. Not the angry storm-out kind of walk, just the kind where you get your body moving before your heart does something reckless. I passed the intern bullpen, where Connor, the new guy with perfect teeth and no clue what a Gantt chart was loudly talking about disruptive synergy. Past the break room, where some poor bastard was nuking day-old salmon. Past the glass-walled war room that used to be mine. And here's the thing, they thought I'd go quietly. That I'd be too proud to fight, too tired to claw back what I'd earned. But pride's a funny thing. It doesn't shrink under pressure. It sharpens. So that night, I went home, poured myself a scotch, and laid out every single timesheet on my kitchen table. Not just mine, my team's too. I had copies of everything. Names, timestamps, Slack logs, emails. I'd always kept records, not because I didn't trust the system, but because I did. And it was there, under the ugly light of my kitchen pendant, that I saw something I hadn't noticed before. The approvals, every one of them marked auto-approved by payroll. But the payroll system was manual entry. There was no auto-approve. Somebody had gone into the system and changed that setting. What would you do if your boss stabbed you in the back like that? Would you walk away, tail tucked, and try to move on? Or would you stay quiet, start watching everything, and wait for the perfect moment to strike? I didn't sleep that night. Not out of rage. Out of clarity. I saw the whole damn board now. Carl wasn't just covering up unpaid overtime. He was laundering it, turning labor into invisible profit so he could earn his bonus. And he thought I'd just roll over. I came in early the next morning. No one notices the old guy in the corner. That's what they forget. They think we fade. But some of us are just waiting for the lights to go out so we can really get to work. There's a specific kind of silence that happens when you walk into a place you helped build, only to realize it's not yours anymore. It's the sound of chairs that used to swivel toward you now turning away. Conversations lowering just enough to let you know you're not invited, and your own name hanging in the air like a ghost that no one wants to say out loud. That was the noise that greeted me Monday morning when I walked back into the office, trying to pretend like the HR email hadn't just pulled the rug out from under 18 years of my life. My desk was still there, technically, but the monitors were gone. My chair had been swapped out for one of those cheap ergonomic things from procurement's worst vendor, and someone had wiped the whiteboard clean. Even though I'd written notes on it Friday afternoon that were still relevant to a project I apparently no longer had any say in. It felt like walking into your own funeral and watching everyone pretend they don't see you standing by the casket. The kicker? Sitting in what used to be my chair, in my goddamn seat, was Connor. Connor, with his tailored slim-fit button-down shirt, his Bluetooth earbuds that never left his ears, and a smile that could sell you an air fryer you already owned. Carl had slid him into my role like replacing an old part on a car they were planning to trade in anyway. I stood there for a second too long, watching this kid scroll through a task manager he clearly didn't understand, asking questions to people who used to come to me for answers. He finally looked up and gave me the same smile he probably practiced in the mirror that morning. "Hey, Dan, good to see you, man. Carl said you were shifting into some kind of advisory thing." I didn't respond right away. I was still trying to process the sight of him opening a version of a document I'd written, now retitled Connor's Agile Integration Strategy, even though the framework inside was word for word mine. I'd literally created that spreadsheet during a 12-hour crunch the night his ass was probably out at some tech networking mixer drinking kombucha and calling it career growth. "Looks like you've got it covered," I said finally, my voice steady but my jaw tight. I walked past him, not toward my desk, because apparently it wasn't mine anymore, but toward the storage closet, where I found an empty corner and an unused folding chair. That was my new workspace. A literal supply closet with a printer that hadn't worked since 2019, a flickering light, and a faint smell of old coffee grounds. I didn't complain. I didn't say a damn thing. I just opened my laptop and started going through my personal backups. I wasn't going to let them erase me, not without a fight. See, here's the thing about guys like Carl and Connor. They think because we don't shout, we're weak. Because we're not posting our every move on LinkedIn, we're irrelevant. But the truth is, we've been playing chess while they're still figuring out how to spell strategy. Over the next few days, I started watching everything more closely. I'd learned long ago that the best way to survive in a place like this was to listen more than you speak. So I kept my head down, took notes on everything, who was meeting with who, what projects were being pivoted, what documents were suddenly getting version histories erased. HR started sending me passive-aggressive calendar invites for check-in meetings that never had agendas and always ended with someone suggesting I consider future planning or external opportunities. Translation: get the hell out before we have to pay you a cent. Meanwhile, Carl was rewriting history in real time. In meetings, he started dropping lines like, "When we rolled out the new architecture under Connor's leadership," as if the kid had designed anything more complex than a sandwich order. My old team, people I'd mentored for years, avoided eye contact, afraid to get too close to the guy with the target on his back. I didn't blame them. The game was rigged, and everyone knew it. One afternoon, I overheard Carl on a call through his office door, talking to some exec from the coast. "Yeah, Dan's still around, but we're sunsetting that role. He's a legacy asset. Been here forever, good guy, but we're moving into a new phase, you know? Agile, scalable leadership. Legacy asset." Like I was a hard drive from the 90s. That night, I stayed late, after everyone had gone home. I plugged into the system and pulled logs, document history, access credentials, modification timestamps. Turns out, Connor had been given edit access to everything I ever touched. Not only that, but Carl had set up a mirror folder that copied all my shared docs into a private drive labeled Transition Materials. And that's when it hit me, they hadn't just replaced me. They were erasing me. They wanted me out, but not before they wrung out every last ounce of value I'd created. They were using me like a resource with a shelf life, bleeding my work dry while telling me to smile through it. The worst part? It was working. Everyone was buying it. So I started doing what any old school guy would do when the system turns against him. I got smarter. I stopped working in company drives. I stored backups off network. I ran version control on my own terms. Every whisper, every memo, every budget tweak, I documented it. Not because I was bitter, but because I wasn't finished yet. I wasn't going to burn the place down. Not yet. But I was going to make damn sure that when the fire started, everyone would know exactly who struck the first match. There's a moment in every long game where the whole board suddenly makes sense, where all the missteps, all the subtle cuts, all the smiles that came too quick or the glances that lingered just a little too long, finally snapped together like the last piece of a puzzle you didn't even know you were building. For me, that moment came 2 weeks into my exile in the supply closet, when I opened an archived email chain from a project we'd wrapped the year before, one I'd forgotten I even saved. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was just following a hunch, maybe even stalling, drinking bad coffee, and trying not to think about how many people I passed in the hallway who now looked through me like I was a smudge on a window. The email wasn't from Carl. It was from one of the junior accountants, Ellen. I think her name was, asking why her timesheet had been altered before approval. The timestamp showed she sent it late on a Friday, probably not expecting a reply, and the response came Monday morning from payroll, just one line. Adjustment made per exec instruction. No name. No reference. Just that cold, bureaucratic phrase that tells you someone up the food chain made a decision and your job is to shut up and deal with it. That alone wouldn't have meant much, except I remembered Ellen had been one of the first people let go during the last round of strategic restructuring. Back then they called it a tough call for long-term agility. Now I saw it for what it was: cleanup. She'd asked too many questions. They got rid of her before the trail got warm. So I pulled up my own records, every single project I'd managed in the last 3 years, and I compared the time entries from our local logs with the final payroll submissions. And there it was, line after line. Week after week, of hours trimmed, shifted, reclassified. And it wasn't just me or Ellen. It was the whole damn team. A pattern so neat it had to be deliberate. What really stopped me cold, though, was the signature line embedded in the metadata of some of the approvals, Carl's initials, tied to admin overrides that should have never come through his account. And right there, under a mountain of late-night emails and misfiled digital paper trails, I realized exactly what they were doing. This wasn't just corporate neglect or lazy management. This was coordinated fraud. They were shaving labor costs, cooking the books just enough to show bigger profit margins, and using the extra savings to pump up performance metrics before board reviews and investor calls. Carl got bonuses for reducing operational expenses, and guess what counts as an expense? You and me. The hours we work. The effort we bleed into this machine. But here's the part that really twisted the knife. They were planning to pin it all on me. The breadcrumbs were already being laid. Quiet changes to project documentation. Memos reattributed to other leads. A few late deliverables with my name suddenly slapped on as delayed pending Dan's review, even though I'd never been looped in. They were building a paper trail, subtle but steady, to make it look like I'd been mismanaging resources, maybe even fudging hours to boost team morale during high-pressure phases. It was a long con, and I was the patsy. 18 years of loyalty, of covering for people above me, taking the fall when things got dicey, now being twisted into a story where I was the liability. I sat in that closet staring at the screen for what felt like hours, the hum of the printer behind me clicking every few minutes like a metronome of betrayal. I thought about calling a lawyer, thought about copying everything and sending it straight to the board, but some instinct told me to wait. The trap hadn't been fully set yet, and if I moved too soon, they'd bury it all and frame me anyway. So I called someone I hadn't talked to in over a year. Her name was Jen, one of the best project analysts I'd ever worked with. She left right after the Agile restructuring, and back then it felt sudden, like she knew something the rest of us didn't. Turns out, she did. Dan, she said after I explained what I'd found, you need to listen to me carefully. This isn't just Carl. There's a committee behind this. Finance, Ops, HR, they've been doing this since before the last audit. I saw them change performance reviews in real time. I even flagged it once. 2 weeks later, my role was eliminated. I asked if she still had anything. Emails, logs, screenshots. I have a drive, she said, voice lowering. I didn't think I'd ever use it. But if you're going to go after them, you better hit them hard. Because they don't play fair. That night, I met her in the back booth of a half-dead bar on the edge of town. We didn't shake hands. She slid me a USB drive across the table like it was some kind of spy movie, and I didn't say a word. We just drank cheap beer in silence. Two ghosts from the same war, still wearing the wounds like name tags. When I got home, I plugged it in. Password protected, of course, but Jen had given me the phrase on a napkin. They count on silence. For words. And suddenly I was staring at a treasure trove. Scanned performance reviews with altered language. Call recordings from Zoom meetings where execs discussed optimizing expense visibility. And one gem of a spreadsheet mapping out the rollout timeline for what they called the legacy phase-out plan. That's what they called it. Legacy phase-out. Not layoffs. Not restructuring. Just a neat little euphemism for getting rid of anyone who still remembered how things used to work before they started playing fast and loose with the numbers. They wanted a scapegoat. They'd picked me. But now I had everything I needed to give them something else instead. A reckoning. Some people plan revenge with fire and fists and fury, but I've always believed the most devastating kind of payback comes printed in 12-point font with embedded pivot tables and timestamp metadata that no executive ever thinks to double-check. The thing about spreadsheets, real, detailed, mind-numbingly accurate spreadsheets, is they don't lie, and they don't scream, and they don't get flustered when you ask them the same question twice. They just sit there, cold and stubborn, quietly telling the truth until someone's forced to listen. For the next 2 weeks, I lived like a man on a mission, working late into the night with the blinds drawn and my old ThinkPad humming like it was alive, like it knew we were doing something worth staying awake for. Every file Jen had given me became a breadcrumb, every out-of-place date and misplaced decimal a clue. I matched her documents with mine, cross-referenced them with public reporting, and built a massive, silent case, one click at a time. Meanwhile, during daylight hours, I kept up the charade. I showed up every morning to my sad little corner in the supply closet, carrying a reusable mug and pretending to still care about internal memos and birthday cupcakes. Carl had stopped looking at me entirely, which was fine by me. Connor, on the other hand, had started to strut a little more, tossing around phrases like agile pipeline restructuring and cross-functional integration loops, like they actually meant something. He even printed out one of my strategy documents and presented it in a meeting as his own, adding a couple of colorful graphs and calling it innovation. I didn't say a word. Not yet, because by then, I had something bigger than ego or pride. I had a plan. See, I knew about the quarterly audit long before they did. It's one of those things you never forget when you've been around long enough to know that fiscal year end isn't just a deadline. It's a ticking time bomb for anyone cooking the books. Carl and his little club had been gambling that no one would look too closely at labor reporting as long as the numbers kept trending up. What they didn't count on was someone like me, someone who'd learned over decades exactly how to bury a minefield beneath a cover sheet. I built a single spreadsheet, just one, but it was layered like a goddamn onion. It started simple, project hours logged versus project hours paid. Then came the overlays, team rosters, payroll entries, executive approvals, time-stamped emails. I tagged everything with color-coded flags, green for verified, yellow for questionable, red for outright fraud. By the time I finished, the file was nearly 50 megabytes, an absurd size for a spreadsheet, but completely intentional. I wanted them to open it and feel the weight of what they'd tried to bury. Now, here's the part that required patience. Timing. Precision. Because if I sent it too early, they'd sweep it under the rug, claim it was old data or contextually misaligned. If I sent it too late, they'd already have their audit results sealed and their bonuses signed. So I waited until the exact right moment, the Monday before the auditors arrived, when nerves were already frayed and everyone was trying not to make sudden moves. That morning, I walked into the office with a thumb drive in my pocket and a backup uploaded to a secure anonymous email account. I dropped the drive into an interoffice envelope, no return name, no note, and slid it into the outgoing bin marked compliance. Just like that. Then I walked back to the supply closet and waited. Not for the fire to start, but for the smoke to rise. It took less than 24 hours. Tuesday afternoon, the whispering began. First in finance, then HR, then ops. Meetings were canceled. Slack channels went silent. People who usually walked past me with forced smiles suddenly couldn't make eye contact at all. Carl looked pale, genuinely pale, like a man who'd just realized the walls weren't solid. They were made of paper. He disappeared into his office for nearly 3 hours, then came out with a forced grin and announced an impromptu alignment session with senior leadership. I knew that grin. It was the same one he gave Ellen before she vanished from the org chart. By Wednesday, the audit team was on site. 3 stone-faced consultants in gray suits with clipboards and the kind of stares that make people forget their passwords. They didn't knock when they entered Carl's office. They didn't ask to be scheduled. They just walked in and closed the door. Thursday morning, I got the call. It wasn't from Carl, not even from HR. It was from someone at legal. They asked if I had time for a casual conversation. I told them I did, but it wouldn't be casual, and I'd like to have it in writing. They backpedaled, fast, said it was just a misunderstanding. No need for drama. That afternoon, Carl called a company-wide Zoom. Said he was stepping aside to pursue new opportunities, and we all knew what that meant. There was no farewell card, no catered goodbye lunch, just one final, tight-lipped smile and a camera that clicked off before he finished his last sentence. Connor stopped showing up by Friday. Rumor was he'd been escorted out after someone found him trying to delete files from a shared drive. I didn't even flinch when I heard that. I just sipped my coffee and opened a new document, one that started with the words, Post-Crisis Knowledge Transfer Proposal. Because when the dust settles, the people left standing are usually the ones who were sitting still, quietly documenting everything while the others were too busy trying to look important. I never claimed the credit, never pointed a finger, never gave them the satisfaction of watching me gloat. But when the board held an emergency session and restructured the compliance team, I got a phone call. Not from HR. From the CFO herself. Dan, she said, we're looking for someone to help us rebuild the integrity we lost. I let the silence stretch, just long enough to taste. I'll think about it, I replied. Because revenge, when it's done right, doesn't need a victory lap. It just needs a signature. The funny thing about revenge is that people always assume it ends with some big dramatic scene, someone getting dragged out in handcuffs, a crowd of coworkers clapping slow and proud, or maybe the big boss finally admitting defeat with tears in his eyes and a bottle of whiskey under his desk. But real life isn't a damn movie. Real revenge is quieter, colder, and a hell of a lot more personal. It's not about one big moment. It's about watching the empire you built them slowly unravel while they scramble for explanations that don't exist, and you just stand there with your hands in your pockets and no one left to blame. After Carl vanished and Connor turned into a corporate ghost story, things got real quiet around the office. It was the kind of silence you get after a bad storm, branches on the ground, windows cracked, but the sky clear again like nothing ever happened. They didn't fire me. Hell, they didn't even reassign me. I think they were too scared to. The new leadership team, brought in under the banner of post-crisis transparency, treated me like some kind of survivor, maybe even a threat. I'd become the guy who knew too much and said too little, and that made people nervous in the way that gets you treated politely but kept at arm's length. They gave me a new desk, this time with a view, like that somehow made up for the months they spent trying to erase me. I'd sit there sipping burnt office coffee while the new compliance officer ran past me looking stressed and slightly terrified, and I'd just keep my mouth shut and watch the meetings pile up like dead leaves in a gutter. Sometimes someone from my old team would stop by, try to make small talk, ask how I was holding up. I'd smile, nod, ask how their new manager was doing, and leave it at that. I didn't need apologies. I'd already gotten justice, or something close enough to it. But the best part, the part that still makes me grin in the dark some nights, was the memo. It showed up in my inbox one Tuesday morning with no fanfare, just a subject line that said, Urgent, Document Review. It was an internal compliance briefing being circulated before the next investor update. Buried deep in the attachment, about page 14, was a breakdown of misrepresented labor costs due to inaccurate reporting structures and unauthorized payroll system changes. They never used Carl's name. Not once. But they didn't have to. Every number, every date, every fake approval, they were all his fingerprints. And everyone on that distribution list knew it. I clicked forward, typed in the address of an old burner account I'd created months earlier. Hit send, then deleted the email. 20 minutes later, that same memo, scrubbed of headers, stripped of metadata, was posted anonymously on a whistleblower forum that just happened to get picked up by a mid-tier business blog with a penchant for scandal. By Thursday, the headline was circulating on LinkedIn, rebranded as Executive Oversight at Fast-Rising Tech Firm Sparks Concern among analysts. It wasn't viral, not exactly, but it was sticky. It stuck just enough to make people ask questions. Stock dipped. Board meetings doubled. Audit committee expanded. And me? I just sat back and watched. I resigned 3 weeks later. Not with a bang. No dramatic exit. No email blast or speech or stapler theft. Just a simple two-line message to HR and a scheduled meeting with my direct supervisor, who, to her credit, actually looked disappointed when I handed her the printed letter. She asked if I'd be open to consulting down the road. I told her maybe, but we both knew I wouldn't. I left behind a flash drive, though. Just one. No note, no label. I slid it into the CFO's mailbox on my way out. I'd filled it with nothing illegal, nothing dangerous, just an archive of project strategies, documentation I'd created, and some anonymized tips for avoiding future disasters. A parting gift. One last quiet middle finger, disguised as helpful advice. Walking out of that building, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel broken either. I felt done, finished. Like the last chapter had finally been written, and I didn't need to turn the page anymore. The sky was gray, the parking lot mostly empty, and I stood there for a second with my hand on my car door, watching the place I gave almost 2 decades of my life to shrink in my rearview mirror. They always said I was stirring up trouble, but trouble was already there, long before I noticed it. I just had the guts to name it out loud. And sure, maybe I didn't walk away rich. Maybe I didn't get the kind of recognition people think justice should come with. But I walked away knowing I hadn't let them bury me. I hadn't let them make me small. And somewhere, deep in the bones of that company, my fingerprints were still there, quiet, stubborn, impossible to scrub out. So no, I didn't light the fire. I just handed them the matches. And I smiled when they struck the first one.